Okay, let's look at something, a new statement beyond the if-then statement, and that's called the switch statement. So I'm going to look at that. So in the switch statement, I'm going to scan down here actually and go down to this one. Often we write this sort of expression: if some variable is equal to some value, then do something else. If that same variable is equal to a different value, do something else. Else if that same variable is some other case, else, and handle the default case here. So we have a bunch of cases where this variable is equal to this value, this variable is equal to another value, or another one. Then we do a whole bunch of if, else if, else's here. Now, because that's so common, we actually have a new statement that handles that, and that's the switch statement. So in a switch statement, let me just show you the general format of it. We say switch and then some expression. This is generally an integer. It can be a character, but it can't be a floating point number or a string. So usually it's an integer. If this integer, and it's just a variable usually, if this variable, and then we say case, and we say if it's equal to this value, do some statements. If it's equal to this value, do some statements. And there's a break after each one generally. And then we have a default case. If none of the other cases are done, we do this default case. So let's look at an actual example. So now we'll start up at the beginning. Okay, so here we're checking for the dog's age. Age in years is some variable that was entered. So switch on the dog's age in years. So if the dog's age is 0, we're going to print this out. If the dog's age is 1, we're going to print this out. Oops. If the dog's age is 2, we're going to print this out. Say 3, 4, 5. Now, if none of these are true, then we're going to print this one out. So it's like a big if then else. It replaces that. So we check if, again, switch, and then some variable here generally, and this is usually an integer variable. And then we start with a bracket, and then we do our case, and then a value for that variable and a colon, and then one or more statements afterwards followed by a break. And these breaks are very important. And then again, another case with another value and a value here, and then this statement. So go through this. This walks you through some of the different examples of a switch statement and some activities related to switch statements that we'll be looking at. And a nice participation activity. Also talks about the break statement, and we can omit those. So if we have a couple cases that all do the same thing, we can just go case 0, case 1, case 2, and then do this all. And then so this will handle case 0, 1, or 2, handle those all. You have to watch the break statements. If you omit those can be bad errors. So if I were to omit this, we do this in these cases, and we keep going and do this until we get to a break. So make sure you put in a break comments here. I worked for AT&T back in the 90s, and there's a huge issue where on Mother's Day the phone network in the entire United States went down, and it was all traced back to some coders who had a case statement to handle air conditions, and they forgot their break statement. So one air condition came, we did some stuff there, and the switch kept going and did all the errors for all the cases, and this cascaded across the United States and shut down the whole phone system in the United States back then. So remember your break statements. Short answer. As we go. And again, you can use a character here. It's not that common, but you can use a character there also. Okay, rather than looking at these challenge activities, I'm going to jump to the examples we looked at last week and show you those. So if you remember last week, we looked at a blackjack game with a card class. Now let's look back at that card class because we had a number of places where we had a bunch of if then else's, and we can work with those and replace those with some different values. So here, let's start with this one: get face value as a string. So here we actually wrote them as a separate group of if statements. We can write this as a switch statement because they're all related. If the face value is this, we're going to do this statement. The face value is this. So they're all related to an integer called face value, and if it's different values. So again, to replace these, with the switch statement, I'm going to write this out. Again, it's nice. Sometimes you want to look at the layout of a switch statement because we don't use them that often until you have to remember what they are. So keep that around. So we're going to say switch on some value, and in this case it's face value, some variable. And then we start a bracket. I'm going to end that bracket right there. So it's my switch statement. And I put in my cases case. So if face value is 1, I'm going to do some stuff. I'm going to set this to true. So I'm going to do that. And then put in a break statement. So that handles this if then. Now I'm going to do another case statement here. So I'm going to copy that in and put in another case statement. So the next case is if face value is 11. And I have face value up here, I just have to put the value. A case for when face value is 11, I'm going to return a string of Jack. And again, I can repeat this. Now, here when I'm done with this, I still have this else case. I'm going to look at that. So what happens if case 1 or 11 or 12 don't happen? So I can do default case here and do what I want to do in the default case. So if one of those other cases don't happen, I'm going to do this command here. I'm just going to set the string to the number, the numeric face value, and do a break after that. So let me finish this up. So for now, I'm just going to comment out the old code here and see. So now I start my method, I declare a variable, and I changed a little bit how this is done. So I'm just now declaring the variable string face value and checking my this face value variable. Again, if you remember from the class, that's declared up here in my class. It's a class level variable, so I can just use that. If face value, if it's 1, I set the string return that I'm going to return to ace. Otherwise, I set the string I'm going to return to Jack, Queen, or King. And in the default case, I'm going to set it equal to the number, and I'm going to convert that to a string using this little trick here. So that replaces this sort of stuff, and now I'm just return that string when I'm done. So that's one example of a switch statement. Let's look at another one. Here. So on this one, get value returns a value in some different ways. So if the face value is 1, so that's an ace, we set value equal to 11. So I'm going to switch this into a switch statement also. So I'm going to say switch on, again, on face value. And I'm going to have my cases here similar to here. I'm going to have a case for 1 and a case for 2 or whatever. So let's look at some ways of doing that. So if case for 1, if it's an ace, I'm going to say the value here, or an ace. And then again, make sure I have my break statement after each case. Now, the next case is if the face value is 11. We're going to do something. The value is going to be 10. So that's for a Jack. And we'll comment that up here. And then a break statement here. And I could replicate these cases again if a case for 12 and a case for 13 for a king and a queen. But one thing I'll notice is that the code I'm doing is the same oops, I didn't quite do these right. Case for 12 and 13. Okay, the code I'm doing for 11 and 12 and 13 are exactly the same. So I can actually group these together. Let me just do it, and so you can see I can just put all the kind of stack all the cases together. I can say case 11, case 12, and case 13. And if there's no statements and no break statements, case 11 will fall through and do this, and case 12, 11, and 12 will fall through and do this code. So this is a way of handling Jack, Queen, King all into one case. Now the last thing is for the other numbers. So there's two ways of doing that. One is I could then have a default case and return this value in the default case with a break statement. So that's one way of doing it. Another thing is I could just list out all my cases here. So this is one way of doing it using the default case. Let me show you another way. It's a little longer. So here's another way of setting this up. I have case 1, so it's an ace. I set the value to 11. And then I have case 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Those I all treat the same. I set value equal to the face value. So that works. This statement works for any of the normal numbers. And then for case 10, 11, 12, 13, I set value equal to 10. So again, this is just another way. I don't know if this is any clearer than the other options, but it's a little longer, but it's another way of setting it up. Now you could also set up each case separately and have a value here, but I think that would be too long and too complicated, not be the right way of doing it. So one of these ways will work. Now, again, I'd have to comment out this code. So I don't need that anymore. So I set value equals to 0, do all this, or initialize an integer variable value, then set it equal to some value here, and then return that value when I'm done using if then. Now we're going to do one more switch statement, and we have another if then down here where we're working with suits. And here we've got some constants. So let's show you how to do that as a switch statement. Okay, so rather than having this set of if-then statements, if suit is equal to this constant car.clubs, and that was a constant, we declared both suit and these constants up here. These constants are static ones, so we refer to static variables as the name of the class car, dot, and then the variable. So those are those constant variables that are either 0, 1, 2, 3 up above. Okay, so we just say switch on the suit, and then we have a case for if it's equal to this constant, the cards.clubs constants, we're going to set this suit description string to clubs. If it's equal to this integer constant, suit is equal to that, we do that. So we have a case for each of these things setting up. Similar down here, we had all these if-thens. We're going to now comment all those out. We don't need those anymore. We've replaced those if-thens with this switch statement. So again, this switch statement just checks if suit's equal to each one of these values, sets the right suit description, and then we return that suit description. So it just shows you another way of playing or of using switch statements. So I can compile this and run it. It should work just like it did before. The switch statement shouldn't make it run any different than it did last week. Okay, so back to Zybooks. Sorry for that digression, but so I'm not going to go over any of the challenge activities in Zybooks since I spent so much time going over those other ones. But go through these examples and consider doing some more stuff with these. We'll be using switch statements a number of times going forward.